Well, Brushie is the center of my universe, but back then it was the center of my great-great-granddad's. In 1889, he was freighting out of Fort Pierre and to some big cattle companies, and that freight business grew and grew into a store where he sold goods.
Right,
And it wasn't until 1905 that he got his post office commission. But after that, he was pretty much settled at Brushie, and his family, his boys and 2 girls and 7 sons, were running the freight wagons back and forth to Fort Pierre.
Sure.
And that worked very, very well for a relatively short period of time, actually, when the railroad came to faith. And that made his freight business pretty inefficient. He did some remarkable things, though, in that area when he was there. One of the interesting stories is about when he had a contract previous to 1900 to fence the west side of the Cheyenne River Reservation.
Okay.
7 sons that were of age then, high teenagers, low 20s. Strung wire for 27 miles, cut all the cedar posts along the creeks, and built a fence between the Cheyenne River Reservation
Right.
cattle outfits that were used to grazing that ground.
Okay.
Those Native American folks that were pushed onto the reservation didn't necessarily want the fence there. Neither
Sure.
did the cattle outfits that were used to grazing on the land on both sides. So it wasn't exactly a friendly thing to do.
Right,
With
right.
shotguns in the wagon boxes and 6 guns on their hips, they dug post holes for 27 miles and stretched barbed wire. Fenced the Cheyenne River.
Oh, that had to have been pretty dramatic at times.
Not understanding friend or foe when somebody rode up.
Oh, right. Oh, yeah, because you wouldn't know.
Not knowing when there was a sniper in the sagebrush or someone destroying your work right behind you.
Oh, yeah, sure.
So that was kind of an interesting feat that he accomplished, and quite remarkable when you think of 27 miles of fence with no power tools, very little tools, adverse conditions in pre-1900. So
Yeah.
other than that, he was a pretty vital part in that community. There's a lot of contacts because being an old original freight company that brought freight right out of Fort Pierre, he was the anchor to a lot of these other post offices.
Right.
A lot of those in that period of time previous to 1910 came to Brushie to get their mail to go on.
Sure.
Such as Marcus and Cooper.
So it's kind of a relay kind of thing?
Yeah.
Right.
Marcus and Cooper would get their mail the next day or 2 after he got it up.
Right. How long was the post office there until?
It ended shortly after 1910. I think it
Okay.
was commissioned in 11 and 12. By 1913, they'd moved out. And actually, my great-great-granddad moved to Cohagen, Montana, and formed that post office.
Oh, okay.
And then he was freighting from Miles City north to Cohagen, Montana.
Okay.
So it wasn't, Brushie wasn't the first one he started, it wasn't the last one.
Huh.
It was in his pioneering spirit.
Right. Yeah.
He took about half his kids to Montana with him, roughly. The other half stayed around the Meade County area.
Okay. Oh, cool.
That's a rough idea of the history. We could go on for hours about it.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah.
This is a really wonderful thing to record this history of all these little posts.
Right.
Ones that had a end date back that far ago, 130 years ago. If we don't document it and record it, it will fade into non-existence.
Yeah.
So I do appreciate you doing the history work and being part of the Historical Society that promotes and protects.
Right. Yeah. Well, thank you.
My granddad came from Norway, him and his brother, and they come to Smithville, and they were going to homestake, and one of their horses died, and so they had to hook a cow up. They had two horses and a cow, and they got to Elm Springs, and they said that's far enough. And so they stopped there, and they passed away there.
Okay.
And this was before there was a survey or anything. This was 1888. And Granddad tasted the ground, and he found out it tasted pretty good, so he thought that was going to be a good place to stay. And so he had this 160, and his brother had this 160 right next to him. He raised horses and as a blacksmith. That's how he made his living, is blacksmithing the horses. And he never farmed very much because he didn't like farming.
Right.
But he liked his Frisian horses. And he raised horses for Fort Meade.
For the cavalry then?
Huh?
For the cavalry?
For the cavalry, yeah. And every month, the cavalry would send out a lieutenant and a couple soldiers in a wagon with a stud horse, and if you had any mares that were ready to breed, why they could.
Right.
And they went to all of it. They went to Sean's up here, who raised horses, and anybody else that raised horses for Fort Meade, because they wanted a certain bloodline for their horses.
Right.
And these Frisians were long, had lots of hair on them, but they were good, sturdy horses, and that's what the cavalry wanted, because the soldier had to carry everything on him,
Right.
and to go. And this is the Indian road through here, where the Indians all came from Bigfoot before the Wounded Knee over there. They came right by our house, and so we have a lot of Indian stories. And this is the road, of course, I said it comes through, goes to Leade and Homestake Mine and Fort Meade and everything like that.
So there was kind of a crisscross then between the two roads there.
Yeah. And then it was 45 miles on this road to Rapid City. And when he had a little bit of wheat he took to town, 40 bushel at a time in a wagon, he'd get to Terrence Corner up here for noon, Owens' Roadhouse for at night, into Rapid, do his business, sell his wheat, come back, and he'd get back out here. And the reason he come to Terrence at noon every day, because Mrs. Terrence run a roadhouse there, and she had biscuits and gravy every noon, and he loved biscuits and gravy.
Who doesn't look like good biscuits and gravy, right?
And his neighbor, his best neighbor, Bob Huddleston, lived here. Okay, this was the first block here that they surveyed. The Army surveyed this. Then when they surveyed this was all English here from Illinois, cattlemen. These were English down here from Texas cattlemen. All down through here it was Germans. Over here was Tennesseans. Over here was Tennesseans. Up here was mostly from Artesian, South Dakota, where Hayes and them, his folks were all from Artesian, South Dakota. This was right in here was all Irish and French. Like I say, all Germans down there.
So there was a true melting pot.
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
It was. It would have been a true melting pot in that little area.
Not really at start, but it became a melting pot.
Oh, right. Yep. Cool.
And that's kind of the story of our life, and I was born and raised right there. Till I was 18 years old, and I left, and...
Is that when you moved to Sturgis?
No, that's when I moved to Homestake.
Well, okay.
I worked for Homestake for 20 years before I started teaching.
Okay. Oh, I didn't know that. I did not know that. See, I always knew you as a teacher.
Yeah. Well,
That's all I ever knew. Yeah. Well, I'm a
I
locksmith.
got tired of working for Homestake, and because it was so much like being in a service or someplace.
Right.
That I went to school and become a teacher.
Sure.
And then the last 26 years or 7 years I've been a locksmith, and now I'm nothing.
Well, you got lots of wisdom. Got lots of things to.
I've lived a lot, and I've lived a good life.
Yes, you have.
Really kind of done what I wanted. Everything kind of worked out for me, not because I wanted it that way, but it just worked out good.
Right. Yep.
Yeah, if I hadn't disliked that, I wouldn't have been a teacher if I hadn't disliked working for Homestake.
Right. Well, you were a good teacher. I remember you.
Greatest job I ever had.
Yep.
especially the first years.
Opal, South Dakota was begun with a post office in 1909 by a fellow called Franza, and he was a Frenchman. And he had the post office for a couple of years, and then his son, Armin, took over for another couple of years, and then it was moved to the John Backus place, and it was there for a long time, and they had a store and so on, and we've got it marked on our map over here. And then Paul Lehman purchased the land and became the postmaster. I think it was about 1930 to 31, I think, 31. And he had it till 1968 when he retired. And that's when Kay Ingalls, who had been she carried the mail as a relief driver for her brother, Vern Simons, down in Red Owl.
Okay.
And so her husband and Vern built boxes, and she took over just like that. She had the post office from 1968 to 2000, and then they closed us. And anybody who knew Kay Ingalls knew that it didn't matter what time of day or if the post office was open, if you needed stamps, she would get them for you. That's how it worked out in the country. And I guess we could say that there was an Opal church building that was built in 1928 by my husband's grandfather and two Ingalls, and they were on the building committee. And then later they built.
And what year was that built?
The old one, 1928.
Okay.
Yes, and then the new one, which is here, and this is a picture that was just taken this week, but this was taken when they had their grand opening, and lots of the family came back.
And when was that one?
I'm going to have to...
Oh, that's fine.
19... Oh, my... I should have...
No, it's fine. That's fine.
It's
It don't matter.
Yeah. It's quite a while ago. They've gone through a lot of preachers and so on since then.
Right.
The Opal Hall was built in 1961, and it was because there was a drought in South Dakota that year, and the guys didn't have any hay to put up, so they decided to build a building. So they built this beautiful building, and it has been used for, there's been a wedding, there's been a funeral, tons of family reunions, the kids play basketball, and now they're playing human foosball upstairs.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And the Opal Cemetery was started in 1968 because my husband's niece, it had been a cousin, was killed in a car accident when she was in high school. Okay. And her parents and my husband's parents were brothers and sisters, and so Dwayne's parents gave the land and they started it, and it's a beautiful, beautiful place. The guys all take good care of it, and they mow it very, very regularly. There is a Catholic church building and a family cemetery, which is along this road.
Right.
And it's old. It's actually on our land now, but it's in tough shape and so on. But the cemetery is all there, and somebody keeps it up too.
Really? Really?
And the Opal Dam is clear down at the end, and it's was built with horses and Fresnos. 1938, I believe, was the year they thought that it was built. It was a WPA.
Sure.
And what else did I miss?
So, what would be a unique story that you either has been told to you or you've personally about Opal?
Over there's a picture of a big barn that was moved 3 or 4 miles with horses and wagons. And it was brought to the place where I live now. And there is a picture of it that's because it was tinned and put tin siding and roof on. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. But horses and wagons moved that 3 or 4 miles. That's a pretty special thing.
That is...
And it isn't like it never happened ever other than that. But
Right.
it still is pretty special.
Do you know what year that happened?
About 1916.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh
And
my.
the story is, because of course it's been passed down, is that Dwayne's grandfather talked to the county and said, you know, what he needed to do, and so they let him borrow the bridge plank from the Sulphur Creek Bridge.
Sure.
And I think they were working on it, so they were just laying there. So that's, well,
No, that's fine.
okay. And then,
That is fascinating.
can I do one personal thing?
Sure, no. Sure, go ahead.
My husband flew for United Airlines.
And what's his name?
Dwayne Vig.
Dwayne Vig.
And he flew for United Airlines for 32 years.
Oh, wow.
And we lived on the ranch for 30 of those, 31 years.
Wow.
And he commuted first to Chicago, then to Denver. And he still ranched full time. And his last flight, and because airline pilots had to retire at 60,
Right.
that was a rule. His last flight was supposed to be the day after 9/11. Yes. By one day, he and I and one of our daughters would have been in New York. One day.
Wow.
So,
That's kind of...
gives you willies, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's going to give you the willies, yes.
Yes.
Yep.
So, is that what
Yes, because we all remember that day very well.
My word, I got the call from people, and I called Dwayne because he was working cattle with a neighbor, and I said, Dwayne, an airplane hit the Twin Towers, and he goes,
Right.
oh, it must be foggy. And I said, no, the sun is shining.
Clear blue sky, yeah.
And he goes, oh, he knew. That
Yeah,
it was
yeah,
really
yeah.
weird.
You'd have, yeah. As a pilot, I'm sure you knew.
Yeah.
Because airplanes like that just don't fly into buildings.
So all day I sat by the phone and kept a notebook of all his friends from all over the United States that called us. Where is Dwayne?
Yeah. Well, that's pretty historic. It's
Pretty special in our family.
Personally significant, yes.
Yes, very much.
And you are
I'm Zona.
Zona Vig.
Right.
Okay.
I'm
All right.
one of those East River people that got a beautiful chance to transplant out here.
There you go. That's right. That's one way to put it. Well, thank you.
You are welcome.
The interesting thing in digging into the life of Sulphur was that I was told when I was at Pier once I was going to do this project, and they told me that Sulphur at one time had a newspaper called the Sulphur Match, but nobody had ever seen one. And so I came back and I started doing the Sulphur research, and lo and behold, I found the only one Sulphur Match magazine paper that exists. And it was Abby Lane McGilvery, who came from Sulphur herself, had a copy in all of her stuff. And so I borrowed it, and I told her when we're done, she needs to send this original to Pier. So now it has been anchored for file forever. So it does exist now.
It does exist. Wow.
An 8-page print. It's got local news in it. It's nice reading. It's interesting. So
Was there just one copy, or was there, just one edition, or they have multiple?
she only had the one, but they had multiples. However, the original storekeeper, not storekeeper, but printer, he kept all the files at home, and the story goes, they had a big party the night before the drinking was legal,
Okay.
and the house burned down.
All right. Oh, they were just talking over there. They just did a presentation, talked about a fire that was in Sulphur. Is that maybe the same fire?
No, I'd be interested though. Which one? I haven't found. I'll have to get this gentleman's name because
Okay.
I've got something here. This is the first store in
Okay.
Sulphur,
All right.
and I can't find who built it, why they built it, what it was used for outside of a hotel and a post office in this case, and a grocery store. but it has a mystery to it itself. It fits in Sulpher, but yet it doesn't. So he may have information there that I could connect some dots.
Right.
So that's probably the most mystery right now.
All right.
And other things is this picture here you may enjoy. This is I tore some of the material off the wall in a bedroom to see what was underneath it, looking for old newspapers. And I found 5 layers of wall stuff on there. And one of them, the bottom one here, this one here, you see the green has a flag impression to it?
Right.
And I tore that off, and there was a flag at one time nailed to the old wood on the inside, and they put this paper on top of it, and that's the print that came out on the back, on the other side. So, and this is the material they used. It was a old oilcloth is what they put on the wall.
Sure.
So it was cold enough out there, they put any damn thing on the wall.
I suppose anything to keep the wind from blowing through between the boards.
That's it for sure. That's it for sure. But Sulpher one time had 15 businesses in town. It was a flourishing town, but the drought ran them out, and it dwindled down eventually to one building. And that one building used to be the dance hall, which is converted to the living quarters, post office, and the general store. And that's what the remnants of this.
What's left there now? Yep.
You know, this is the remnants of it.
Sure.
The last standing.
All right. Very good.
That's about it.
It was established 31 May 1881.
This is Viewfield, right? Yeah, Viewfield. Yeah.
Post office, and it closed in 1964 in March. And it was in various locations, but
Okay.
it wasn't the last 50 years, I guess, was right at Viewfield there. It's right in that area. 7.5 miles north of New Underwood, north of Elk Creek.
Okay.
Viewfield originally was close to the Deadwood Trail.
Okay.
It came up Elk Creek.
And then I suppose when that trail died, so did Viewfield?
Well, no, not in 1908 when the railroad came through New Underwood.
Oh.
That's when New Underwood started.
Okay.
Other things, yeah.
So okay.
And that continued till the interstate was built, and then the towns died. It was a small town.
Right.
But they closed the post office in 1964, the store. That was the end of Viewfield, basically, except on the map.
So tell me something interesting, or an interesting story, or something that about Viewfield that you can. There's probably way too many but pick one.
There's a lot of stories, I suppose. This is a gruesome. There was 2 girls murdered there in the 70s.
Oh well, that sounds interesting.
They were apprehended in Box Elder. They left their bodies at Viewfield in an old building.
Ah, that's interesting. So what's the story behind this long picture down here?
It was a farmer's picnic in 1926.
Farmer's picnic.
Yeah.
Sure had a lot of people show up there, didn't you?
3rd.
Yeah, I see that. July 3rd, 1926.
I think that hall was built about 1920 or something. And this church was there, but it was moved over beside this hall sometime after the hall was built. It was west about a mile.
Is the hall still there?
Yeah, it's still there. Pretty poor shape.
That
Not much
is
happens there.
what?
Not much going on in Viewfield.
Probably family reunions and weddings, maybe?
They don't have much of anything there anymore. They used to play basketball there, the school kids.
Oh yeah.
It's on the New Underwood Road, though, one of the busiest corridors in this part of the country.
Yeah.
It's so fully.
Larry, do you remember when they quit having stuff in there? Because some people came by and they remember the speech contests in the
The school
80s.
thing in the 80s, yeah.
Yeah.
The last dance they had, I think, was 1976 that I remember.
Okay. A lot of people talked about going to dances there too. That was the main topic of conversation. People who knew where Viewfield was, they knew the dance hall.
This church that was relocated beside the hall, it burned down in 1957, then they built another one further away.
Okay.
But they used to vote at that hall. But
They had elections there till it became ADA non-compliance.
Of course.
that
Probably in the 90s,
Well, that was about the time ADA came in, yeah.
the last election, I'm guessing around the turn of the century.
Right.
They had,
Yep.
they had the county Viewfield precinct, and all that stuff would go on there.
Right.
That's the reason they quit it.
All right. Sounds good.
I'm Vonnie Whitman, Ackerman, and my grandfather was George Edward Whitman, and he built the volunteer store in 1900. And I have over here a replica of the volunteer store. I went out when it was falling down, and I picked up the lumber, the rocks, and the sand, and I gave a photo to my sister's neighbor who built the volunteer store for me. And my grandfather did the mail route, and he took the mail all around to the small towns that are all represented here. And then my grandmother ran the store, and she'd buy eggs from the people in the area. Then in later years, when that was kind of getting dilapidated, they built the one that's still standing now. It's a home, and it's right at the top of the Belfouche River. And so this is the Whitman family. I mentioned my grandfather. This is a picture of him in his younger years. He's looking pretty rough and ready there. And then when he was older, this is the whole family. Right here, the whole family. And that's my grandfather who started the store and my grandmother who ran the store. And I have a little history here of the volunteer store that people are welcome to take, and a little history of the Whitman family and the Mars family. So,
Okay.
kind of gives you an overview of the volunteer, and it was quite a place in its day. I understand they made cigars, and
Oh, really?
maybe some moonshine, and who knows what.
Oh, my. So is there any, you grew up there then?
No, I grew up in Sturgis, and actually my grandparents were deceased before I was born.
Okay.
So in later years, we would always stop at the volunteer store, but by then it had been sold.
Right,
So,
right.
yeah.
So do you have a story that might stick out in that somebody else may have told you about volunteer, something unique, or, I mean, you told me about the moonshine, so, but
Moonshine and making the
something
cigars.
and making the cigars, right.
Yeah. No, I just know that it was a very popular place. People would stop on their way to pier, and it was just pick up their mail.
Do you know why in particular, why it dissolved?
No, I just think back then, once the post offices and the cars easier to drive to Sturgis, cars
Oh, yeah.
became faster. People could get into town. So
All right.
I know there's a lot of history. I've heard a lot of history about Ku Klux Klan in that area.
Oh, sure.
And I think there's still a burned cross on one of the mountainsides out there. And
Right.
that was, I've read a lot about that with Mr. Rambo had written articles.
Oh, sure, yep.
Ku Klux
Yep.
Klan. And so it's fun to talk to people that say, yeah, their family was involved in the Ku Klux
Right,
Klan.
right, yep.
I think that's an interesting history.
Sure. Well, thank you.
Thank you.